there in some area, like some region in the coastal landscape, they hold systems. Another example is in Yunnan province where I was born, and they think they used to burn the forest for the cropland, and they have a concept that the forest is sick, the fire can cure. So from our perspective, they are actually improve the biodiversity and adaptation. However, these measures and needs from the farmers cannot be well accepted under the current policy. So the government or the markets sometimes provide seeds, or the trees are not nature-based. So the real valuable products provided by the ecosystems are actually not the best-selling products in the market. So what we want to achieve is these conservation actions combined with the traditional knowledge and the science can benefit.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like traditional knowledge is important to sort of bring changes, not just in sort of new ways of doing things for climate change, but also for changing, maybe beliefs that are not as science-based, that are maybe wreaking a little bit. I'm wondering, do you feel that you have some support for your initiatives, either coming from the public sector or the private sector?
From our national levels, there are some special actions of climate change adaptation in the agriculture and food systems. First is, like by 2050s, the national demonstration bases will be set up for the crop farming industry in areas sensitive and vulnerable to climate change. And second is, by the year also 2025, a climate-smart crop farming technology system will be primarily established. And the third is the certification of climate-friendly and low-carbon agriculture products will be set up. And from my point of view, even though we have some high-tech industry demonstration, but we can still choose an ideal way, more diverse species, and thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to you, Mr. Sum. Do you feel that there are any public or private support systems, or just support coming from the public or the private sector for what you've spoken about for climate change?
We still benefit from decisions with extensions and in developing and improving our practice.
Yeah. Yes. Dr. Ogilvie, so I'm going to, just throw maybe a new question at you, because all three about the importance of knowledge transfer, extension services, sort of bringing different sources of knowledge, education.
Yeah, and that really is the excellent question, I think. So from our point of view, what we see in Australia is very clear support, very clear interest for action on climate change. There's no doubt in any of the researchers that I speak to, in any of the farm advisors I speak to, even farmers, certainly government officials. So absolutely, there's clear acknowledgement that something needs to be done. When we look at the evidence base for what we should do, what are the priority actions, what are the proven practices that are going to get us there, The evidence that we see is, I'm going to say, rather weak. And it's not because of want of trying, it's perhaps because of underinvestment in research. So what we have is very good, very rigorous, but small-scale studies, limited to geography, limited to time, limited to different agricultural operations. And what we think is needed, and the problem with that is that something might be proven to work in one part of Australia, but you can't then assume that it's going to work for farmers in other parts of Australia. And it's very, very clear from our observation and other research that farmers make evidence-based decisions, and they actually need robust, context-specific, seriously scientific evidence to actually give them the confidence that they need to make these what could be really significant long-term investments, but also the depth in the science to actually be able to implement it. And so that's why we've designed the Farming for the Future program to actually kind of focus on exposing the science to the farmers and advisors so that we actually understand what is it that they need to search to give the information in a way that they can actually, and some other philanthropists.
Thrive in food supply chain. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I speak for most of the islands in the Caribbean, there is a critical need, first of all, for sensitization. This is where we have to take the message to the farmers. Sensitization is one, but importantly, there is a critical need not only to sensitize but also to organize. And I was following closely all the presenters, and I think that when we speak about a farmer-driven agenda, we have to speak about producer groups, we have to speak about cooperatives, because spreading the message farmer by farmer, farmer to farmer, we are not really operating on economies of scale or scope, and there is a need for us to have a mobilized platform upon which we can sensitize. The political will is globally expressed, and I really want to thank ICA for ensuring that from the hemisphere that excellent work is done, and all the other persons from around the world, and that we have a seat at the table, and we're not necessarily a part of the menu, well, at least not yet. But it is clear that there is a global expression of the political will. Importantly, though, there's a need for a legislative agenda to be initiated in each country, the mobilization of the factors of production and implementation. I think we know the rule book. It's just about getting the action started. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I know that we have, we have an intervention from Professor Xu Yinglong, who is the chief scientist at the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences. He was very keen to be with us here to record a few remarks, which we will now play. And this is quite exciting. He really put in the effort. He so desperately wanted to be here, but we will hear his words anyways.
agri-food system. everyone. I'd like to have my response as how to make policies to promote technological innovations to address farmers' adaptation needs. Firstly, I'd like to have a very brief explain on the rationale how to integrate the farmers-driven innovations into the national adaptation strategy in China. It is the interaction mechanism of climate, natural ecosystem, and the agri-food system. The additional climatic strategy cultural system with the average trend and the enhanced extreme climate events. So we clarify the adaptation layers. For the first layer, the adaptation task is the utilization of climatic resources. For the second layer, the adaptation task is to strengthen disaster reduction. For the third layer, the adaptation task is exploiting the ecosystem services to increase agricultural climate resilience. And the fourth layer, the adaptation task is establishing social innovation mechanism to guarantee. In China's national climate change adaptation strategy, utilization of climatic resources, it is the key points of the adaptation tasks. For the second layer, the key points of the adaptation tasks was summarized. For example, to complete the early warning system, strengthen the material provision, and develop the adaptive variable disaster reduction system, something like that. And for the third layer, the tasks of adaptation was summarized as strengthening soil and water conservation and ecological protection, promoting conservation farming, developing agroforestry and 3D farming in hilly areas, encouraging the intercropping, adoption of high efficiency pesticide and ecological control on pests and disease, preventing invasive alien species, increasing biodiversity banks, protecting agricultural heritage, and optimizing how to guarantee of developing high innovation. The high-tech innovation system is a combination of big to cope with the enhanced temperature event. The effects to cope with the enhanced cold temperature. The core benefit of this IoT and big data system for mitigation, we can see it saves water, fertilizer, pesticide, electricity, and manpower. And for adaptation, to avoid the damages from the extreme climate event. So it is the efforts we tried to integrate the farmers' need on innovations into China's national adaptation strategy. All right, that's all. Thank you.
It's pretty amazing to hear a lot of the same themes that we're all grappling with.
Could be an issue of technology. First of all, I want to really appreciate the invitation and especially the good comments that we have heard from the panels that are here. And I also do recognize the presence of the minister and acknowledge the very wise words that you've given us. And I want to begin by saying, yesterday I've been in this COP since the beginning, and there are a number of events that have taken place, which could be, depending on how you look at them, be interesting or could be very disappointing. One is we have the Emirates Declaration, as rightly has to project the issues of the farmers on issues of climate action. Yeah, so for me that is a critical issue, that in many of our countries we need to have these policies as one of the mechanisms that is actually going to project the issues of farmers. Yeah, and we have to put the farmer right in the middle of these policies. I want to give an example. Our constitution in Kenya talks about participation. Under the Bill of Rights, Article 4, of the tool that can actually be able to report the farmer climate actions, as well as delivering information on climate actions. In Africa, farmers are aware climate is changing. Yeah? But if you tell them about emissions, they may not be able to. About these issues could be context specific, and I agree what Sue just said. Even in Australia,
gases in the air, because as farmers, we are aware that livestock emit methane in the atmosphere. And I wanted to understand from my friend in China what they are doing to ensure that the management styles do reduce the emission. We've had industries trying to change the way of doing things to reduce the emission. How are farmers prepared to reduce the emissions? I do agree with the previous speakers, the need for multi-stakeholder partnership. In English they say, what you do for me without me is not for me. If we exclude farmers and we expect them to abide to adapt, we should not see this happen, because we have researchers on this side researching on their way of doing things, but what they research is kept in the shops. It's not shared with the farmers. How do you think farmers will be linked to this researcher to understand the adaptation mechanisms? So we need to incorporate them in the multi-stakeholder systems and ensure that they are part and parcel of the decisions and discussions at the table. Otherwise, we shouldn't keep them in the menu. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Did anybody want to address that comment? I mean, it's about climate change mitigation. You mentioned methane specifically, and the role of the farmer.
So I think the question is obviously very pertinent, and there's a number of solutions that are being developed in Australia and around the world that are directly targeting point solutions for different parts of agricultural production. What I'd like to talk about is that our experience in Australia is that some of our leading farmers who are very productive, profitable, producing very, very high quality livestock and wool, have also managed to learn how to work with Australia's natural ecosystems and actually dramatically increase the amount of carbon storage and sequestration. And so we have a number of farmers in the research sample that we have that are actually net sequesterers of carbon, just as a business as usual. And when we see those, what we also see is very biodiverse, very stable, very functional landscapes that are actually also conserving some of Australia's really important native animals like koalas. And so what we're very heartened with that, and it's farmer innovation, and this has been solutions developed by farmers. We're very heartened by that, because what we see is the very, very large potential to examine, are those practices and those achievements generalisable not only to Australia but also to other countries. So I think that's what I would like to comment in response to that question.
Okay. Thank you. I think we have another question.
Excuse me, good morning. My name is Steve Maxime. I have the pleasure of being both a farmer and a researcher and now a policy advisor. I was lucky enough to be at COP17 in Durban. When as the Caribbean representative, I was part of that movement to get agriculture moved from being on the menu to on the table. And I celebrated the Paris Accord when agriculture was featured. And I looked forward to the implementation of all of the policies coming out of climate smart agriculture. And I'm here to report that there are parts of the world, the Caribbean being part of it, where we have developed farmer-based solutions, going under the guise of sorts of fancy names like nature-based solutions, climate smart agriculture, and we have actually had governments, and Minister Caesar was being very modest when he didn't mention that his country was one of the first to declare a genuinely comprehensive climate smart agriculture that had both mitigative and adaptive components. And this is farmer-based, locally owned, trademarked, Caribbean, climate justice and just transition overlays included, where farmers have agreed, have decided, have been part of the mechanism to develop a comprehensive climate smart agriculture using a registered tool which has auditing, certification, and other trademarks to be able to legitimize the flow of funds that have been in agriculture and that can avoid the greenwashing. So I'm here to say that I've seen the progress, we are making progress, and that there are parts of the world where these nature-based solutions, farmer-owned, farmer-registered, are very much in evidence. So take heart, don't panic yet.
Thank you for the wonderful presentations. My name is Evangelista. I'm with the WFO Gymnasium program. I'm from Zimbabwe. My question to the panel is that there are young farmers who already are bringing innovations to the table. How are you currently assisting them in your regions and countries? Thank you.
That's a good question. Anybody would like to take that one? Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm going to exactly answer that question, but there's a couple things that I wanted to connect from panelists and the questions that I think are important. The first is that farmers do change. Just like all of us, they don't want to change necessarily. They don't want to add costs. They want to make sure something works before they do it. But as someone was talking, I was reflecting on when Norman Borlaug went to Mexico and he worked on for about 15 years, and he started making his experiments and started applying fertilizer, and he had these different, Mexican varieties of wheat, and went to the Yaqui Valley near Ciudad Obregón, and he started experimenting, and the farmers kind of looked at him and said, "What is this gringo doing?" They weren't so confident, and so they kind of went to his field days year after year after year. But eventually a farmer leader, the governor of the state there, embraced him and started planting some of that wheat. And lo and behold, the wheat started growing, and growing a lot more abundantly and a lot more successfully. And slowly but surely, that was the beginning of what became the Green Revolution. He went then to India and Pakistan and met the same resistance. But eventually there was a political leader, a farmer leader, who started to try it, to experiment. And lo and behold, we know what happened. And so I think the same thing will happen, but it has to be done where it's a good business opportunity for the farmer and it's something that works. And so I think the innovation that we talk about in research centers will be applied. We need to do it faster, but I think the world's moving faster and innovation's coming faster and the crisis is coming faster. So it's going to happen. And we talked about how farmers are a lot alike in different parts of the world, and so I wanted to end with a joke from my colleague at our representative to Suriname, who he's saying, what is he going to say right now? And I think it relates to Keith or to Arnaud. I asked him, how's your farm doing? And how are you able to manage a farm while you're working in Suriname and going up to St. Lucia? He's like, he has someone to work with him and all that. And he says, but you know, man, I'm bleeding money. And I'm sure any farmer would say the same thing. So we have to remember that farming's a business. And we have to give them tools so that their business is successful. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a microphone right there.
In terms of support for the youth, and I can, again, offer with some confidence that there was a very successful IFAD program in Grenada, where a consultant was hired to develop the very first interactive manual on climate-smart agriculture for 4-Hers. And I can tell you with certainty that that project was completed, and you now have representatives from 28 schools in Grenada, which is another CARICOM country. 28 members of these schools now have in their possession both the digital and hard copy versions of an interactive comprehensive climate-smart agriculture manual that they are using right now. And that is going to guarantee that the next generation of farmers are going to be as climate-smart, more climate-smart than the current generation. So the stuff is being done. And there are a number of mechanisms that will encourage young farmers, such as 4-H, the 4-H movement, so that we are seeing Caribbean-wide a move now to encourage more scientifically trained, more business-oriented, economically savvy young farmers. So again, sorry to be the second messenger of hope, but I can tell you that farming is in good hands in certain parts of the world. So I can stay here and testify that there are a bunch, more than a bunch, of qualified young farmers armed with the tools, digital and otherwise, to develop practices that are going to be farmer-determined, farmer-run, and from which farmers will benefit first. Thank you.
Oh, yes, we have a response. Great.
Yeah, I wanted to add on how we are prioritizing issues of youth, and I'm happy that you mentioned that you're part of the WFO gymnasium, and as farmers' organizations, youth issues are at the center of what we do, starting from WFO with the gymnasium, where we bring together different youth, build their capacity, learn from each other, but also give you a platform where, for example, you engage politically at global level, but also represent interests of the youth at global level. Then at regional level, for example, from the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, we have initiatives together with FAO, like the AYA platform, the Africa Youth in Agribusiness platform, where youth learn from each other, share opportunities within such a platform. But we've also supported more than 12,000 youth in terms of coming up with bankable proposals, in terms of linking them with financing partners. We've trained over 760 groups, youth groups in different agriculture value chains. And in some countries at national level, we also support youth organizations. We try to link them with the government to be able to work as service agents for government. For example, I had from Eugene from Rwanda, the Rwanda Youth in Agribusiness Forum, RIAF, is one of the youth organizations that are also service agents for government. They work closely with the RAB. They are implementing different climate-smart agriculture practices, different innovations, and they help government in terms of scaling up some of those innovations from the field. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody would want to add anything on the panel? Good. So I think in conclusion, before warmly thanking the panel, I mean, we've gone around the world of agriculture in an hour and some. I think all the themes were there. But the theme that did come back over and over again is the theme of the farmer as the equal partner. And the information flow. So having farmers' voices heard, but not necessarily through an intermediary, having them right there at the table the whole way through in developing solutions, having a lot of information flow back to the farmers and a lot of transparency in the tools that are available to them. And I think if there's one message we can take away is perhaps all of us who are engaged in developing these processes can keep that to heart when we are all going back to our respective countries and doing our jobs, is to remember to always have the farmer in mind and how we can better integrate them and their voice. On that, I would like to thank our panel and thank all of you for being here today.
they don't, it's static, but you can at least lift it, yeah. Which is, yeah, that was nice. How is it, you've been a really busy bee, Oliver. So
I've been a bit of a busy bee.
thanks a lot for all the insights in the WhatsApp group.
That's all right. It's sort of worked, hasn't it?
It has worked. It's quite a lot of people.
People have been able to share. I suspect that lots of people have muted notifications. Very nice to meet you. Oliver from Game. How are you? Nice to meet you. From Game. From Game, indeed. Lawrence always doing well. He arrives tomorrow. So if you're used to
Okay, it's good to begin.
You've lost your name.
Hello, hello.
I don't know about that. I think it's because everyone knows you already doing an introduction. But yeah, Lawrence arrives tomorrow, and I'm sure we'll be happy to.
Yeah, very good afternoon. Could you please take a seat so we can start our session? So, very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and also dear colleagues and friends who are watching this event virtually. And welcome to the event with the title on Sustainable Food System Future, which is jointly organized by the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development of Vietnam in collaboration with our dear friends from the Southern African Confederation of Agriculture Unions, SACO, and the Climate. And thank you very much for your cooperation and commitment to make this event possible. My name is Quang Huy. I'm the Agriculture Counselor at the Vietnam Embassy in the US, and I will be the chair of this event. Ladies and gentlemen, this event aims to consider the demand and supply side interventions, innovations, and global frameworks for transformation, and more on that, putting forward a vision for a food system transformation that can deliver food security and nutrition in an economically profitable, socially viable, and environmentally sound manner. In the next hour and a half, we will hear the different perspectives and insights from the diverse experts on agriculture, nutrition, sustainability, and technology, and engage in discussions to explore innovative solutions for sustainable food system. The section will combine live online and word clouds polls with the real-time discussions to capture the collective thoughts, ideas, and priorities regarding sustainable food systems and how we can build resilience on our future food system as well. So without further ado, now I would like to invite Ms. Huỳnh Thị Thanh Tuyền, Research Team Leader, Alliance Biodiversity and SEAT Asia, to speak about the transforming towards sustainability experience in food system and healthy diets. And actually, there is some slight adjustment in the agenda as Dada, also the first speaker, is with unforeseen circumstances. She will be arrived a little bit late, so we will have our first speaker. So now, Ms. Tuyền, please take on the stage and.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for saving time joining together with us. My name is Tim from Alliance Biodiversity SEAT. Because the time is short, so I would like to take you to the journey to understand more about the process rather than the detail. I put all the detail and all the material in the link. So if you are interested in the scientific product and also more detail, you can go inside to get that. And we still own the time to discuss. So today, I would like you to listen about how the Alliance Biodiversity in SEAT will use the healthy diets like the leverage point in the food system approach to make the food system transformation to sustainability. So why Vietnam? Because the project in several countries, but in Vietnam, we have more advanced level. So we would like to share you the process, because the process is something, it takes a lot of participatory approach, and also it going together with different stakeholders. And you may know Vietnam achieves a lot of achievements in terms of the socio-economic development. Besides that, they still have some new challenges along with the urbanization and also with the new launch of the country, the GDP increase. That's about the double burden, and also right now we have the triple burden of malnutrition. So we talk about not stunting anymore, but also micronutrient deficiency and also overweight and obesity. And it's quite complicated because that's along the project. The country, like the long country, they contain a different local food system. And also the culture, a very strong factor, rise the food system transformation. And along the transformation, we also recognize that the environmental footprint of the diet also gain more attention because some areas in the urban area, they consume more red meat, and it leads to the higher greenhouse gas emission. However, when we talk about healthy diets, it's not simple like we think because not all the consumer, they can afford the healthy diets. And our study also saw that 70% of the low income cannot afford that. So how can we still continue with the socio-economic development but still pay attention to the nutrition and health outcome and also think about environmental impact? That question is not simple. It will be the trade-off of food system, and it needs different evidence and also different engagement from different stakeholders and also different ministries in the country. So why food system? Because in the context of the country right now, they still have the different ministries stick with different sectors. For example, here in food supply chain, we have Ministry of Agriculture and also Industry and Trade, and about the consumption more with the Ministry of Health. But we still lack of the, right now, we still lack of the strong collaboration to create the food environment, the external environment of the consumer. So it can lead to the lack of the linkage of the consumption and production, and therefore different trade-off of food system can be held more trade-off in that. So starting from 2017, at that time, not many people think about food system because it's quite complicated in the context of the country at the national level, local level, provincial level. So how we start with that? We first downscale the food system framework at global scale up to the national and subnational level because we cannot talk to the ministries if we make the food system very complicated like this. We need to make it in the set of the indicator that's in their duty, in their task, so they can understand where they are and how they should work together to contribute to different outcome of food system. And along the process with that, we use this framework, and with downscale, we make in the rural, peri-urban, and urban food system. We saw different indicators. We talk with different, like our local authority, and also the stakeholder along the process. We develop the set of indicators specific for each site. And based on the information in the local way. So that means talk in the way they understand themselves, they know their own, and they know how they would like to go together to sort out what's the food system issue, the solution of food system. Fit in the target for. Based on that step, we have the lab report to go. And together with our strategic partner under the Ministry of Health and under the Ministry of Agriculture, we work together to fit into the information of the challenges and the solution of food system in 7 dialogue in the country with the 2 national level, 3 subnational level, and 2 independent. And thanks to all the stakeholders, especially strongly gone of Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Health, we can be able to bring together more than 1,000. And Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Health together, all the ministry, they feel more important why they should work together to make the outcome in nutrition and health, socio-economic, and also environment. And together, in the context of the country, we thanks to the strategy of agriculture and rural development at the new phase, because the first time they mentioned about agriculture production to move to agribusiness. When they move that, they need different sectors work together, different ministries work together, and also the involvement of different stakeholders, not only in the country, but also other, like global level. So that's the lab report, so we can be able to integrate food system and healthy diets inside the they call sustainable food system transformation national action plan as a tool to achieve the objective of the strategy. Also understand that capacity building is crucial in the country because the process can take longer time, and it's very important to build up the capacity. And that's the thing we are doing, the role of SME, etc. So we're not only based on in ASEAN countries, and we show how the top indicator to seek into different ministry to know where they are, how they would like to be, and they can make decisions along the process to contribute to achieve minimize the trade-off and maximize the synergy of different outcomes with the engagement of different sector, different stakeholders at different level, not only at planning but also implementation. We still have many things to be shared. We don't have time. If you're interested, you can go to the link to get the material. Thank you very much.
But data is not okay. You can the panelists. Okay. So thank you, Ms. Nguyen, for your presentation. Now I'd like to come to the very exciting part of with lots of interactions, and I would like to invite Danush Dinesh, the founder and chief climate catalyst of Climate, to moderate the panel discussion with a participatory dialogue on the future of food systems. So please take on the stage, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. Can I have this microphone? Is it working? No, it's not working. It's working now. Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wade, and really great to have this collaboration with you in Dubai. So we've been collaborating for many years, since 2016, and Vietnam has been articulating the role of food and agriculture in the UNFCCC negotiations. So I work for Climate, which is an organization I started 704 days ago at COP26 in Glasgow. So Climate is a think and do tank for food and climate. So we try to bring these two communities together, link science and policy. But my role here is not to share what Climate is doing, but try to get inputs from all of you and this panel. So this panel is titled Harvesting Voices. So the real role is to harvest voices in this room. And if there are people watching online, you can also come on board. So what we're going to do, and for this, you all need to have your phones out. Many of you already have, but you need to stop whatever else you're doing and focus here. We have a Mentimeter. So you can go to menti.com in your phone or computer. Some of you have computers. So, and there you have to put in the code that's on here. That's 8413 2545. Oh, somebody's ahead of me. So essentially what we want to know is, what is the one word that comes to mind when you think about the future of food systems? Oliver has been keeping count. Oliver, how many events are there on food systems at this COP?
600.
600?
Yeah,
wow. Maybe. So food systems is like the flavor of this COP. Okay, so I'm missing the... Okay, I can just use this microphone then. Yeah, so there's 600 events around COP here, and that's kind of on different dimensions of food systems. But what is your view? So what do you think is one of the key word? And I don't have a phone with me, so I can't. My word would be farmers, but it's not here. Change the narrative. Regenerative, radical, nutritious, resilience. Resilience. Okay, that's really interesting. There's not much convergence there. People converge on technology and resilience, but not the other things. Okay, so I'm going to not follow your instructions, but it's really interesting when we look at these voices that you're feeding in, and those remotely as well, on what is the one word. And the food system is very complex, so you can't define it in one word, but let's try to unpack what some of these things mean. So we have a great panel here who's also representing different voices. So starting from the far right, so we have Ismail Sunga from the Southern African Confederation of Agriculture Unions, which is a membership organization of over 16 million farmers in Southern Africa. So we have a farmer voice. We have Oliver Camp from the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. So also an NGO, but working on nutrition issues, but he's the climate lead there. Then we have Salah Filosof from Polig. Polig is a private sector company, but they are a consumer-facing company. So we also want to bring in the perspectives of consumers in that side of business. We have Joe Puri from the International Fund for Agriculture Development, IFAD, which is an international financial institution, as well as a UN organization. And we have Bruno from Brazil, from the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock, where he's the Director for Sustainable Production. So from a government perspective. So what we want to know from you is, what is your one word? So let's go quickly on the panel. What's your one word? Bruno, what would be the one word that comes to your mind?
Is it working? No. Yes. Okay, now. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Danish. My word is resilience, and I'm glad that
so you agree.
It's there.
Why is that?
So, it's estimated that we are losing at least $6 million per hour due to global warming, anthropogenic global warming. Agriculture is one of the main sectors affected by those events. In Brazil, that usually we have a friendly climate, we are experiencing the most severe drought in the Amazon ever recorded. We are experiencing an increase in frequency of tropical cyclones in southern Brazil, compromising crop production. And we still have to increase food production throughout the century. Population is still increasing, mainly in the tropics. We have some social demographic aspects, like income that's rising in some countries of the global south, so food consumption will have to rise. And we have to find a more resilient way to build and to develop this activity. So adapting agri-food systems, I think is key, is vital and urgent for us to have food security in the present and also in the future with a just transition.
Many of us are experts on resilience, right? Can you give us an example of what you're doing in Brazil to increase the resilience of food systems to as you mentioned, ensure food security? Can you give us an example for those of us who are less knowledgeable?
Yeah, sure. We must adapt the food systems in order to keep producing, facing those extreme events. The most frequent and more impactful event that we have from climate impacting Brazilian agriculture is usually droughts, either in sustainable irrigation, as well as conserving soil and water through no tillage systems, in preserve moisture in soil, and then the crop can be more resilient to any drought that happens during the season.
Okay, thank you, Bruno. We'll come back to some of the points, but that's really helpful to also get that concrete example of how drought affects agriculture and how it can be made more resilient. Joe, I want to ask you one word, but I noticed here that nobody's mentioning finance as well. So how does the food system work without finance? So that's my question, but what's your word first?
Well, my word was the mirror opposite of Bruno's, which was insecure. And the reason, and it's interesting, I suspect that everyone's sort of using the more positive word, which is resilience, that we need to focus on resilience because it's so insecure. Right? But I mean, and the other word that I did put in was finance as well, because it gives you two options, or three options. And I think the key challenge of food systems is that food systems are context specific. There's the issue of measurability, and if we want to think about aggregation and building common platforms that go across food systems across the world, then we've got to think of some standardization, which has defied a lot of expectations of private sector. And where if I build different risk appetites, we announced what's called the Africa Rural Climate Adaptation Financing Mechanism, or FIM. And the idea is that we bring in different kinds of investors with different kinds of appetites. So one, it's a $200 million platform. And the idea is that it's located in Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda. And really to on-lend onto farmers and get to, I understand that the number of farmers is more than 700,000. But the idea is really to on-lend while bringing in financing from different sources, which include bilateral sources of financing. We've also got commercial sectors, so Equity Bank itself is putting in $90 million. Bilateral donors include the government of Denmark as well as the government of Finland. We've also got the Nordic Development Fund, and of course, as IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, we are also putting in skin in the game in terms of technical assistance. And the GCF is also putting in $55 million. So the important thing is recognizing that everybody has different risk capacities, and you can come in different parts of the overall platform with respect to, say, debt-based investment or equity-based investment, and those then help to either correct the challenge that we don't have markets for some capital, that's why debt financing comes in, or equity financing essentially to share risk and de-risk, and really taking on board the idea that we can, and grant financing to bankable pipelines of projects. So all three of those are coming together in this platform.
Great. Thanks, Jo. And we can dive in a bit deeper on that. But Sala, what's your word?
Yeah, so as Danish introduced, I'm representing the demand side, I guess, in terms of being a big buyer of agricultural commodities ourselves, and then of course creating the demand, as we are more or less the customer interface, and we are a brand owner. So Pauli, very shortly, just to give a little bit of context, we are indeed a food and beverage company, mainly active in commodities like coffee, and then we do a lot of chips, tortillas, spices. So it's a big portfolio of things, but it does boil down to, from impact perspective, few crops like coffee and wheat and corn. And I'm glad that you mentioned on the Brazil, on the vulnerability side, because my words were vulnerable, hopeful, and then
vulnerable. You can only one word.
You could enter three. You could enter three.
Yeah. Vulnerable.
Vulnerable, and then hopeful.
Hopeful.
Hopeful. Mainly because there are a lot of things that we can do right now. Obviously, I'm sure we'll dive into that that later on today. But vulnerable, particularly, and the transformation is necessary because obviously it's very vulnerable. You talked about resilience, and we all talk about resilience from different perspectives, but our entire business model is of course built on availability and the quality of these commodities, and the livelihoods of the farmers of course depend on it. So we all depend on the same value chains, and I think from this side I'm happy to talk about what we can do in our capacity to help that and bring the hopefulness to.
Yeah, so what are those hopeful measures that you see?
Yeah, so I would say, there are a lot of things we can do right now. So when you talk about fertilizers, or when we talk about different practices, some of these do take time. So it's not a magic wand type of activity. And what we do in our value chains, we engage directly with our traders, and then we have local expertise in different countries to really work out what is the local interventions that needs to be done and can be done. And then we, as the off-taker, give those demand signals. We might not have a demand for these products already from the get-go.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, so we have, for instance, we have tortillas, where we reduced the carbon footprint by up to 50%. And then in those particular tortillas, we've done a lot of on-farm interventions, so really working on different farming practices, no tillage, for instance, looking at the fertilizer application. But then in that particular product, we also tend to look at all the others, so packaging, logistics. We want to make sure that we convert that one product sort of piece by piece in that chain. So that's a part of our approach in trying to look how much we can do and how much we can transform in one single product, for instance, product at a time. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot for setting the stage. Oliver, what's your word?
Thanks, Danush, and hello everybody. It's good to be here, good to be on the panel. I notice I have the small extra pressure of being the only person on the panel with their wife in the room here to embarrass them, so I'll try to speak coherently. I think there are a couple of words. I noticed one that's a bit not safe for work on our word cloud there. I wouldn't go quite that far, but I'm afraid I do agree with the idea of the fragility of the food system. I think my word would be fragile. And
Fragile.
particularly in the context of nutrition, where we work, we know that already nutrition, food insecurity and nutrition insecurity is a growing problem, and that many people, up to about 3 to 4 billion people in the world, suffer from at least one micronutrient deficiency. So in addition to those 735 million we know are hungry, we have this huge burden of malnutrition, and we have obesity on the other side of the spectrum. So I think there's an awful lot to be done, because that is a product of our failing food system. And we need to strengthen, reinforce, bolster that food system through different pathways. And I'm sure you'll ask me for an example in a minute. I think a big part is policy, which we'll come on to in a minute, and the way that needs to be strengthened. The entire way our food systems are managed and governed, the laws and the regulation that manage how we control our food systems. But also other issues around how we support food value chains so that they can deliver nutritious foods to people who often don't have huge purchasing power, especially in the context where game works. How can we make sure that those nutritious foods are getting through? And that's really where we focus our attention. So.
Yeah, but Oliver, nobody's mentioned policy here.
No, and I think that's, it's not the glamorous side of food systems transformation, is it? But I think it is certainly the first step. We have to have coherent governance. We have to have good coordination. I was pleased to hear from Vietnam that it's this idea of working across different ministries, departments, and agencies. It's about bringing health together with climate, with agriculture. And that's what we've seen with the Emirates Declaration this week and the Leaders' Declaration on Health as well. We're starting to break down some of these silos, which both at a global level and then translating to a national level, I think will make all the difference in how we create stronger policies for nutrition.
Thanks, Oliver. Ishmael, what is your word?
My word is opportunity. I think we selling a lot of problems to people. But in problems, there are a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
That's our philosophy in Sakao, that look at opportunities that arise from the problems we are trying to solve for. In this case, one could see entrepreneurial opportunities for the young generation of farmers to do adaptation or to do mitigation. So don't sell agriculture as an example because it has got a bad image. But if you sell the opportunities for entrepreneurship that are in agriculture, then you got it. That's the reason why I'm selecting opportunity as my word. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Well, why do you think there's farmers are not mentioned here?
Well, I saw some farmers there. But I think that's not the point. The point is that we are all in a system.
Yeah.
And if a system gives opportunities,
yeah,
that is for everyone, that includes the farmers. But if there was a word that I wanted the second word to mention, it was going to be equity.
Yeah.
Because until we have equity and transparency and accountability, mutual accountability in a system, the system keeps on delivering poverty on primary producers' side, farmers, and opulence on the other side. So that system won't be fixed until there is equity and fairness in the system.
Okay. I just want to switch off topic because I want to start with you another round, which is looking here. And now the reason I asked for one word is so I can remember. So from Ishmael is opportunity, from Oliver it's fragility and policy, from Salah it was hopefulness and vulnerability, Joe finance and insecurity, Bruno was resilience. Right? So these are some of the dimensions you've covered, but there are some others which are not covered. And I see one thing that comes up is technology and innovation, quite a bit, and that's been highlighted in the Emirates Declaration. It was highlighted in the presentation. So I would like to hear your perspectives. So Ishmael, starting with you, what do you see as the role of innovation and technology in that system that you described? How can that system change with the power of innovation and technology?
I think we need to really look at how to innovate the entire system. Sometimes we're looking at particular segments of the system and maybe trying to innovate on the point of primary production. It's always talking around that. But as long as the entire system is not critically examined and reconfigured, and innovation does not need to be an engineering solution. It could be a policy solution. It could be a workflow solution. But the tendency has been that one, we look at it as a research issue, not as an engineering issue, maybe much more as a research issue, not as an engineering issue. So I'm calling for innovation that should also deliver to all the different actors, particularly the primary producers. But because if it does not solve for that area where there's extreme poverty and yet there's opulence in the entire system, it is not going to work. Yeah.
Thanks, Ishmael. So Oliver, coming to you, you mentioned policy, and I did my whole PhD on policy and science-policy interactions, and my feeling is policy is a bit too slow. It's often reactive, and we are at COP28, it's taking, 30 years. So there's somebody is calling for more radical action. So what is your view on what can be radical? And it can be radical different policies. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and this comes to the point about innovation, and I think that it's right, as Ishmael says, that some innovation can be very low-tech and, again, not particularly glamorous. This kind of policy innovation in the kind of partners you work with, innovation in finance, of course, but I'll let Joe speak to that topic. And I think we definitely need to rethink the fact that this food system trajectory we've been on until now has taken us to a very bad place. We know that environmentally and from the point of view of nutrition, we're really not doing very well. So I think that quite radical rethink is about equity. It's about a more even distribution of value through the value chain. And so we need to make sure that it's the farmers who are being rewarded for the work that they're doing. And particularly within that, I think it comes to this concept of the true cost of food and true cost accounting that we saw in the State of Food and Agriculture report from the FAO in the last couple of months. Because at the moment, we don't have a brilliant way in our policy and in our financial and economic mechanisms to price in all of those things that we know are so valuable, the social good, the health of our people, the environmental impacts of our food systems. And so I think one of the most radical things we could do is finally crack that issue of how we price in those really big issues that are in all of our long-term interests, but aren't quite in the short-term interests of the Q4 balance sheet or the government expenditure for the next quarter.
Yeah.
So that would be where I'd start.
Okay, thanks, Oliver. Salah, I have a question for you. I mean, Oliver also described how the coordination amongst ministries, right? I'm also curious how, within a company, how do you coordinate? You're head of climate and nature. How do you coordinate with the nutrition department in Polig, and how you do that? Because a lot of people are mentioning malnutrition, nutritious, obesity. So how do you bring climate and nutrition in Polig or another company's context?
So for us, nutrition is a key component of our targets, our sustainability targets. So obviously we feel that we have a role to shift diets to a more healthier setup. So we are working to transform our portfolio of food to be more nutritious, and for that we work very closely with our R&D departments, looking at reformulations and really looking at really understanding what are the impacts. So I have a nutritionist in my team working on these, and together with our with our R&D, really looking at our total portfolio and where can we shift if they fit to our portfolio or not. If I may, very quickly, I wanted to comment on the innovation piece, because of course our internal R&D is part of that, and it doesn't only stop to the nutritious, so innovating more nutritious products, but also more sustainable and looking at our current portfolio, where can we do small tweaks in packaging or actually in the production, other production phases. But I did want to say where, I really fully agree with Ishmael, by the way, that it doesn't have to be super tech always. So when we talk about like corporate R&D departments, it might feel like that's the way. But we also do a lot of collaborative innovation in testing, particularly in farming practices. And I think we have a role in making sure that these practices and these insights are actually delivered to the farmers, and we then support, for instance, in our approach, we pay a premium for the farmers to start working on these with longer term contracts, and then that there would be a proof of concept for them to start doing that, or other farmers to start do that in a large scale. And on the resilience piece, I think the innovation actually, that could be a bit more techie side of the innovation, because what we do collaboratively is also work on more resilient crops, etc. But then again, I think it's our role to try to find a way to then implement these and start applying this somewhere further upstream in the value chain, but it might not be accessible to some of these farmers themselves if we don't sort of pitch in with different value chain partners as well.
Thanks, Salah. Joe, I wanted to come to you with another theme which I see, which is around the political economy of the food system. You know, that people calling for changing the narrative, business as usual politics. There are also terms here which is often a bit controversial or divisive, like genetic modification. So, I mean, we know many of these solutions, innovations which are out there, but food systems is fragmented and we have our views, diverse views, right? How do you view that? If we are to transform, how are we able to unite people from a political perspective?
Thanks, Anush. So actually, let me give you an example of where we traditionally deal with a lot of diversity or disagreement at the government level, and then some of the challenges that get created, but I'm hoping that I can also comment a little bit on the previous speakers. So in Laos, when I was in Laos, we support agri-food systems across 80 countries, provide amongst a whole menu of options, then really direct our financing to building value chains and supporting smallholder farmers along these value chains, right, and market access and financing. So long story short, in Laos I was there, and one of the challenges we realize in a lot of our food systems financing is that we are speaking to the ministries of agriculture or livestock, as in Bruno's case, and these are not the ministries that are really keen to think about nutrition issues, right? That's traditionally the ministries of health. And when we are talking about value chains, say coffee or meat or cassava or coffee, as I said coffee already, but cash crops, those may be getting a lot of smallholder farmers, there are 680 million of those across the world, to think about tapping into value chains that are commercially viable, but what it does also do is turn their attention away from home gardens and diversity of vegetable consumption and nutritious food consumption. And that's something that we do want to ensure as part of our investments is also taken care of. So then we have to work, and this was true for Indonesia and many other countries that we work in, lending. So you have to take loans, essentially, and the government has to repay. Knowing a generation of people that's going to be healthy. But the lack of communication across ministries also means that that process becomes transactionally hugely heavy for us, because again, we're speaking to the Ministry of Finance as our first port of call, because that's how our loans are going through into countries, right? So there's an entire diversity of actors that we've got to work with, and not everyone is engaged on the same topic. Sorry, I just want to talk to something that Oliver and Salah spoke about. This is not just true within the policy, the traditional policy framework. If you look at the World Benchmarking Alliance report, the 350 companies that were featured there that account for half of the overall global GDP with respect to food, very few companies actually pay attention to the nutritious and health content and spillovers of the products that they are putting out, and seem to integrate it in their own thinking strategically. And I think that's where the role of public policy has to lie. It has to be to nudge this entire system and the quantity of finance that may be coming into food and nutrition into quality financing. And public institutions are the only ones that have the incentive to do that.
Thanks, Joe. Bruno, one final question to you, and then there are two more questions. But to me, the conversation seems to move towards the role of ministries and coordination. Oliver mentioned that, Joe mentioned that. You're sitting in a ministry in Brazil. How do you view that from your side? Is that working well, or what are the challenges you might face, and how can other stakeholders help you? It's not all on you as well.
That's a good question, Danush. And yes, we have 13 years of experience conducting a sectorial policy to fight climate change in agriculture in Brazil, and actually making this alignment between several ministries and stakeholders is key. But when we are targeting food systems, I would like to remember that for a successful policy in this sector, the key actors are the farmers. We should take more careful when we are designing the policy. The farmers are at the heart of the policy for agriculture, either tackling climate change or for other purposes. So we should look for multiple benefits. And how we look for that? We first have to understand the farmer's needs. Different than, for example, addressing deforestation or addressing waste management, which are mainly driven by public efforts. When we are taking a look at agriculture, it's basically a private activity. So you should have co-benefits, socio-economic co-benefits together with either adaptation or mitigation benefits. That we should work on those triple wins or perhaps nutrition and other multiple wins. And so how we are conducting that in Brazil since 2010, that we have first established that policy. The policy is called the ABC Plan. It's an acronym for low carbon agriculture in Portuguese. And based on that, we are promoting those technologies that conciliate gains of productivity with co-benefits of adaptation and mitigation. Therefore, you can create a virtuous circle of social, economic, and environmental benefits. Let me explain perhaps in another way. When we are designing that policy, we carefully select the set of technologies that we are fostering, that we are going to promote. They must be science-based, they must meet the farmers' needs, and they must be fostered by investment by the government. When you have these three key aspects, you can promote this virtual circle, and you are actually showing for the private sector, the financial private sector, what you are building a de-risked pathway for investment in a sector which is sustainable in all the pillars of sustainability. And based on that, you are not going to rely only on public money. You also can grow exponentially the money invested in that pathway. That's how we are working on it.
Thanks. This is really interesting. I could keep diving, but we need to harvest more voices. So next, a question, Rita. Wow, people are already answering. That's cheating. But thanks for doing that anyway. But if those of you who have not answered, please go to Menti again. The code. Does anybody not have the code? Okay, everybody can see it. So this is, which stakeholder group do you think plays the most significant role in driving sustainable food systems change? Wow, policy. Private sector and business. A bit disappointed, research doesn't come up higher. Wow, policymakers, wow. That's interesting. And very little power for consumers and individuals. That's interesting. And international organizations, zero. Joe, you need to vote for it.
Well, clearly, I think we need to do a better job of advocating, but I feel very optimistic that it's actually government and policymakers and not as much research or private sector, actually. Yeah,
Why don't you share your reflections a bit more? Why is that you see the emphasis on governments and private sector might be more transformative? Is that how you see it?
I think because private sector, and we all know that, there's a central metric that takes the private sector and commercial interests forward, which is return on money. But return on investments shouldn't be the only thing that guides you, and we've got to look at the global good nature of also nutrition. And that's why I think that the onus should lie and the accountability should lie on government and policymakers to then say, well, why aren't you changing the landscape of incentives so that private sector that does not invest in both accounting for the negative spillovers with respect to the environment, nutrition, etc., and or if the private sector is not investing in health and nutrition, then they need to be penalized. So I think the accountability has to rest. The private sector is not going to police itself, right? It is, and you've got to change the incentives of the game, and the only reason that we have governments And the value added of governments should be and needs to be that they create a playing field where the incentives are right and the pricing is right. So I would, and I don't think international organizations, as we know, are only as strong as the membership. And our membership is all countries. So we work through countries, we work to the objectives of countries, we work to the objectives of governments. We don't come and impose our own, but yeah, we do help to nudge, right? But it needs to be country-driven and country-led. So we work through governments. And it's really important that governments take that, that's where the buck should stop. So I truly think that I like that, but now I need the Brunos of the world to sort of say, are you ready to take that accountability?
What do you think, Bruno? You have the question. Are you ready to take the accountability from Jeff?
Yeah, certainly. Actually, that's what we're building, that's what we're working on. And basically, Brazil has been working a lot to increase transparency in its production chains and that accountability. We used to be like 50 years ago, importer of staple foods and suffered of a lot of food insecurity. Now we are the largest net exporter of agricultural goods in the world, and we have a population of 200 million people, but we are providing food to 800 million. So we are aware of our responsibility, and that as policymakers, what we are conducting and integrating with the sector in order to have supply chains that complains. That's something that, again, the key here is to engage the farmers. And we should not build that only on demand-side measures or not recognizing the efforts and the costs of the farmers. Actually, there's a lot of room for segmentation in the market and adding value. So that would be something that I was saving that for the third question and to remember us about multilateralism. But I'll leave that to the third question.
Okay, sure. Salah?
Yeah, I'm really glad, Bruno, you mentioned the farmers, because I actually was missing that a little bit in this poll, as in, who was in the driver's seat, but I understand this looks more in the enabling factors and sort of, which piece in the puzzle moves the needle the most. And I do agree as well that governments and policymakers really hold the keys here. However, I have to comment a little bit on the role of private sector, which is not a homogeneous group, by the way. So I think there are a lot of different sort of actors, and companies like ours, we don't always wait for the policymakers or the regulations to be there, but at the end of the day, I also think that the floor needs to be lifted for all, and I think those boundary conditions need to be there. Otherwise, we all know that it might not be that easily adopted, and there might be different market mechanisms in that way. But for instance, companies like ours, we have our purpose and we have our targets. I already mentioned we have nutrition targets in terms of converting our portfolio to be more sustainable for both people and the planet. But then in the planet piece, it really involves our emissions reduction targets and nature work that we do, and that we drive ourselves without the push from governments or other. Well, actually, there is a role for NGOs and government sort of business organizations to drive the progressive business of that. So I do see links from the other parties as well here.
Okay. Oliver?
Danish, can I be the irritating panelist who argues with the question?
Yeah, you can, but very quickly.
I think that this slightly kind of undermines our drive to taking a more systemic approach. And I think exactly the point of the complexity of the food system is that I answered private sector and businesses because ultimately they provide the world's food, whether you're talking about farmers growing it or Nestle providing what Nestle provide. But they are product of, from the top down, the government regulation that affects them, and from the bottom up, everything that consumers are demanding. Indeed, governments are also products of what their voters want. So we are all part of this system. We all need to change as consumers and be willing to eat food that is more nutritious and more sustainable, and perhaps in some cases where we can to pay more for it, so that others have the the ability to afford it. And then I think that can then lead to this sort of virtuous circle where you have governments able to introduce stronger policy and stronger regulation, and you have the private sector understanding that there is a market demand from consumers for a more nutritious, more sustainable kind of food. I think if we try to take any of the links in isolation, they're able to point somewhere else in the system and say, well, we can't act until this happens. So it's for us as international organizations to try to bring it all together and bring up all of these different parts simultaneously.
Yeah, but if there was like a pot of money, who would you allocate it to?
Well,
in the order of priority.
Without the policy and the better regulation, you can't give it straight to the private sector, because at the moment their incentives would lead them to do a different kind of thing. You would make more money by continuing with the status quo. And likewise, I don't think that we're going to be consumer demand. So I guess I would still put it towards policy and coordination and governance.
Thanks, Alo.
It's imperfect though.
Ishmael?
I think I would also rephrase the question that is posed here. It is saying, which group do we think plays the most significant role now, as things are so bad now? And they're saying who is playing the most significant role. That's the way that I'm interpreting it, because it's a faulty system. And if one looks at who has caused it to be faulty, then perhaps the answers that are here might actually be correct, because the fault lines are in policy, particularly in terms of the backbone infrastructure that is so critical in ensuring that where the farmers stay out there, there's decent human dignified lives apart from agricultural production. If you reside in an area where there is no roads, there's no energy, there's no digital ICTs, there's nothing, how would we expect innovation and productivity to increase? And that is the responsibility, in my view, of policy and government. So that's where the responsibility, at least for the backbone type of requirements, lie. That's the first point. The second point, I'm not surprised that researchers and academia have been given a very low score here. Not that I would gripe with researchers, but when you want to fix things, you don't call a researcher. You call an engineer to fix it. What is needed now is to fix things. It's not to examine it further. I think the examination has been done, all due respects, but we need fixers. When my cooker is not working, I call an engineer. When my ablution is not working, I call an engineer. So the message being that let's be balanced in what is required to fix a system and not rely on one particular discipline. Because it's a system, so it requires everything working in unison.
Thanks, Ishmael. I'm running behind time, so let's go to the third and final question. What should be the top priority for policymakers working towards sustainable food systems? I think it fits in quite nicely. We didn't know that you would all prioritize policymaking so much. So now policymaking is high priority. So what are the priorities within policymaking that you see? Can you go back to your Menti Vita and for subsidies removal, monitoring systems, pricing in externalities? Oh, there are a lot of ideas here. Self-reflection. Okay, so we are really short of time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the panel members, I'll start with you, Ishmael, like which of these you find that resonates with you the most, and if you would like to give how you would approach that suggestion.
I have not had time to glance through, but just a quick thought. I think the point really is that you need to look at the entire system and actors and look at which ones actually have the greatest leveraging. And I still come back to the area of something that catalyzes everything to happen across the entire system. And I go back to policy, innovation, and government in terms of backbone infrastructural requirements. That's where it should lie. Because that is going to crowd in a lot of effort from both the private sector as well as other players, including farmers. Thanks.
Joe, and I realize you have to go as well, so give us your closing comments.
Well, thank you so much, Dhanush, and I really apologize. I did want to hear the comments from the other panelists. What I wrote here was subsidies removal, so that was my phrase. That's why I think that, government has a really important role here, because if we want to get the pricing right, and if we want to ensure that the $4 trillion of externalities that the Dasgupta review spoke about in the food system actually gets priced, then we've got to first start with recognizing that yes, there's a huge gap in the overall pricing, and we need more resources, and if we can take away those subsidies, I think in the food systems it's $1.7 trillion, take that away, we've got financing, and we've got lesser distortion in the food system with the right incentives. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate your inputs, and that was really nice closing comment. Let's remove or reorient subsidies. Bruno, what's getting your attention? And this is all directed towards policymakers like you, and you said you wanted to come back on multilateralism as well.
Yeah, actually, I got inspired by the first two questions and tried to answer the third question with just one word, and it came to me actually multilateralism, because I have already spoken before when I was answering one of the questions, what we are doing sectorially in Brazil and with our public policies. But as we are here for the 28th time in this meeting, and it's been 30 years since the convention, we should not forget its principles. And that's especially important when we are targeting agri-food systems. Actually, when we look to agriculture, for example, or agri-food systems around the world, they are extremely diverse and really unequal. You have pastoralists in Africa, you have industrial feedlots in North America, you had a lot of food insecurity and scarcity in the global south, you have overconsumption and food waste in developed countries. So there's no one solution. Actually, you just have to analyze the data and build efforts to conduct and to really get a strategy that fits your country, your sector, or your population. So let me give you an example. When you look to emissions from the agri-food sector, and you look for developing countries and developed countries, in developing countries, the main source of emissions are land use change and agricultural production. When you look to developed countries, it's basically waste and commercialization. And that communicates with that food insecurity versus overconsumption of calories and nutrition, basically. We are all talking about nutrition, but in different aspects here. So we should recognize these heterogeneous, these distinct patterns that we have across the world and reinforce multilateralism. We are experiencing an erosion of multilateralism in the last 20 years, at least. We are coming to unilateral measures usually, and now we are experiencing, unfortunately, some discriminatory measures that are affecting international trade, and that will only lead to more inequality and perhaps even crises such as violence and wars. And that's not what we are here for. We are here for dialoguing, for recognizing the different rights, for sustainable development of all the nations. And that's something that I would like to highlight, because by, for example, only penalizing producers, we are creating barriers, and we should acknowledge that effort and build those together systemically. That's the way we can assure just transition and a mutual cooperation. After all, we are in the same planet, we are in the same atmosphere, and there's no safe path for the future outside multilateralism.
Yeah. I'd love to come back to you, but we are running behind on time, so we'll see. Salah?
Yeah, I don't want to really reiterate what everyone else has said already, but I do agree that redirecting subsidies will already go quite far. Will take us quite far, because at the end of the day, I agree with someone said here that we already know what we need to do, and we just need to get on it. And I think there you can, with subsidies, they're sometimes very counterproductive or harmful at worst. I do want to maybe add on and build what you said, Bruno, on I guess from the making more transparent on consumption choices and steering with the demand signals. I think there is also a big role for governments to do this and enable companies to help in this in an aligned way, so that it wouldn't be obscuring consumer choices, but rather that we would all speak with the same language. That would already help quite a long way, and in some regions there is more developments in this direction on food labeling, for instance, or more transparency on how do you communicate the qualities of food. Yeah.
Thanks, Oliver?
Yeah, so I want to give you very quickly one short-term, one medium-term, and one long-term intervention. In the short term, we have a real issue around nutrition intakes now. We need to make sure that people are having those gaps in their nutrition plugged. So things like social protection programs are incredibly important and a big part of GAIN's work, and also things like fortification and biofortification, kind of quite simple ways to quite quickly, relatively, increase nutrition consumption, the consumption of nutrients in vulnerable populations. Second thing, in the midterm, we need to be looking at value chains and all of the actors within them. So we need to be strengthening, of course, the farmers, but then looking at all of those SMEs, the missing middle, as it's sometimes called, to make sure that food that's produced is making it to market, making it to consumers, and we have those farm-to-market links that we need. And then thirdly, in the long term, I would just come back to that point of really understanding the costs and benefits of health, of environmental preservation, pricing that in, and then being able to deliver nutritious and sustainable food at a better price than the unsustainable, non-nutritious food that currently dominates diets.
Thanks, Oliver. So I'm rushing because this panel is really great. Like, I've been to many panels. Like, people usually come with written speeches and they read, but everyone's like, okay, let's hear what people have to say, and we're going to comment on that. So it's really cool dynamic. So, but we want to push them a bit further. So I want to open up to questions. Like, are there things that people think have not been mentioned? But we have only like 10 minutes. Questions, 30 seconds. There's one, there's another one, three. So we take those 3 questions and then we come back to you. Yeah, it's on.
Okay, hello. I am Shibu. I work with GAIA, Global Alliance for Internet Alternatives, which is basically working on this, but for the last 30 years I'm working in the field of environment, agroecology, organic farming. So I have some perceptions on this. So I think primarily the panel discussions I was observing, there was appeared that there is a kind of a disconnect between the departments.
Okay.
I would say that that is primarily because of the finance. That is, the financing actually compels the government to make it into departments. For example, in a cow, the front side of the cow is animal husbandry department, the back side of the cow is dairy development department. And both these departments never, what you call it, they don't integrate. And right now we are again, that is because of international finance. That is what is happening in the global south, especially in Asia. Secondly, now we are talking about finance, but you have to be very clear. Finance, you are meaning like you are taking on the loans. See, what we are talking about the
Can
grants.
you please come to your question?
Yeah, I'm just making some observations. I think we have to discuss about the grants, and the wrong questions will lead to the wrong answers. Like when you give the question, there is no option for farmers. So there is no farmer came up in the stakeholder. I think the market mechanism, everything is there, but not on the farmers. I think you need to be a bit more cautious about when you look into the deeper issue. The issue is that in India, farmers are suiciding just because the bank balance, the debt is nearly $6,000, maybe that much amount. If we can clear it with a kind of a financial mechanism as a grant, not as a loan. So that is something we need to discuss. I think all the loans can be discussed in global, like what you call World Economic Forum, not here in the what you call climate adaptation thing. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this opportunity. I think I'm Manes Carter from the Farmers Union of Malawi. One of the critical area that is also sustainable in the food system from the farmer point of view is investment in production and processing. The second one that I wanted to comment and contribute is the issue of policy. We need our policies to be harmonized. If you notice, most of the policies, they don't speak to each other, especially the food production and the food policies. Thank you.
Thank you. One question.
Thank you very much. My name is David from Ghana. I just work for companies. There have been a lot of debatable topics concerning genetically modified foods. Genetically modified foods. and most people have the opinion that it is, have some effects on human health. I want to know that, based on their perspective, do they think that this particular approach is quite prudent for individuals to consume? Is that the pathway for sustainable future?
Which particular approach?
Genetically modified foods.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so open, Oliver, you want to go first? Then Ishmael.
Try to be very brief, but on policy coherence, both our friend from India and from Malawi, absolutely. And we have a large program of work in 12 countries where the first step to everything that we do is to kind of establish the coordination across ministries and departments. But you make an interesting point about the finance. If the finance doesn't match up, both at national level and international level, then that is still a big blocker. Jo and her team at IFAD are doing some work on something called the 3FS tool, which helps you to analyze financial flows to food systems within a country and then to allocate it more efficiently. So I think that this is the direction we need to go in.
Yeah.
On GMOs, very quickly, because it's a controversial issue, I think the science isn't terribly controversial and that it probably doesn't have a terrible health impact to be consuming GMOs, but let's operate in the realities of where we are. Firstly, there are issues to do with the kind of corporatization of the food sector and who controls the supply of crops and seeds and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, there's a consumer acceptance issue. If people don't want to eat GMOs, if governments aren't happy with GMOs, let's not force GMOs on people. We can do enough with regular breeding practices and with the indigenous knowledge and the approaches that have helped us to survive this far.
Thanks, Oliver. Ishmael?
Right, I'll start with the finance, and I always say finance is the enabler of most things, and some of them are bad things and others are good things. So it becomes so strategic as an area to focus, because if it is producing a value chain, it's financing a value chain that is going to be hazardous to human health, then it should also be made accountable. It cannot be that the other players are accountable and it becomes itself isolated. So touching on finance and ensuring that it is accountable and responsible up to the end, to the consumer point, is important, in as much as when there's environmental degradation, when forests are cut, quite often farmers are responding to the pressures of the other actors that are being financed to do that. And guess who becomes the only problem is the farmer. So let's look at who is equally accountable. Everyone in the chain is accountable, including finance. And if there are any punitive measures that have to be taken, they have to be across the entire chain. It cannot be on one part. I think we really need to be a bit innovative in the way that we conceptualize how things good and bad happen. Quite often there's one factor behind it, it's the financing piece. But it's a sacred cow in many ways. But sacred cows sometimes have to be discussed.
Yeah. Okay.
But with respect to GMOs, I quite agree with Oliver here, which is also the position of Sakao.
Yeah.
That really it is and. You cannot prescribe one to the other. And depending on whether people like it or don't like it, don't force it down their throats.
Yeah.
And farmers have got no moral or other right to force feed consumers because they're farmers. No. If they want it, they want it. If they don't want it, they don't want it.
Okay.
So
everything
is
Ishmael.
possible.
So we have like 2 minutes left. So Salah, 1 minute closing comment.
To be honest, I think it was mainly on policy discussions. So Bruno, please go ahead. I can add it.
So you have 2 minutes, Bruno. You've got it 1 minute from the private sector.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to answer it fast. Regarding grants and loans, the first question, actually both are instruments that should be used considering the situation. You can use grants to implement innovation projects, to fund research, and perhaps to build some successful cases. But in order to scale up that, you'll probably work on loans. But to have the environment for the farmers to receive loans and pay back for it, you also have some types of regulation that's in some countries or in some situations may not be available. For example, the land ownership and other types of regulations. Regarding how we can build more systemic approaches on public policy and also address not only primary production but processing, storage, and distribution, that certainly is something that we are working on in Brazil. That integration between ministries is key, because you won't, basically, it's a way that you can use more rationally and more efficiently the budget that you have. You're targeting multiple benefits, and that's key to build those policies. And actually, third question, I guess I missed part.
So maybe we stop now, but you can chat with Bruno or other panelists afterwards. We are going to now have a small change in program because our opening keynote is going to, speaker has arrived a bit late because she's incredibly busy. We have Ms. Imelda Bakudo from the COP28 presidency. She's senior advisor on food systems, and she's been mobilizing countries, and we've got 134, is that the number? Countries endorsing the Emirates Food Systems Declaration. And she was going to come and tell us about this at the beginning. But now, Dada, what I'd like to ask you is, you've heard what people in this room are saying, how this relates with the Food Systems Declaration. Please.
Thank you, Danush, and thank you, everyone. And sorry for being late. I should have, from the presidency, I should have known the map better, but it's super big, so apologies, everyone. So I'll make this quick. I wasn't part of the poll earlier, and I wanted to give my own words to the poll, which is a group of words, because I couldn't find on Google one word for this, which is meet each other halfway. If we really want to have transformation on food system, I think we need to meet each other halfway. And what we have done on really engaging with countries to support the Emirati Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food System, and Climate Action, and garnering 134 endorsements at head of state level is something along this line of meeting each other halfway, of providing conciliation and providing agreement. Thank you to everyone here who has helped us achieve this. I think it's publicly there's a lot of praise for this. Of course, we also welcome criticism. But so far, I think this is a very good exercise in showing this meet each other halfway. It was difficult. We've got NGOs who all have interests. Oh, we want nutrition. Where's nutrition? I don't see it here in this document. We don't see nature positivity. We don't see gender, indigenous people. And then we've got very tough countries. Bruno, there, representing here. Thank you so much for endorsing the declaration. And it's both from non-stakeholder and stakeholder side. It was a tough exercise to get this. It took us a year of consultations with multi-stakeholder to get there. But I think meeting each other halfway, conciliation, is really necessary in transformation of the food system. Because at the end, at the very high level political signal, we got there. But that's not the end of work, right? And also, this kind of conciliation and agreement is not just manifested or seen at the state actor level or at policy level. I'm also handling a farmer-centered event that will open Food Day on December 10. The farmers are also saying, oh, that group, their approach is not the best. We are the best. You know, everybody's saying this. And this whole UN process is about coming together because everyone is, agroecology is the best, climate smart is bad, regenerative agriculture is for businesses and that's evil. So we got all of these, but how do we come together here? So I just wanted to say that while some of us also think that COP is a circus or a show or a movie, and a circus, there's too much going on. There's also the convening power of the presidency, which I mentioned earlier. We managed to calm things down and put together and say, okay, this is maybe agreeable to many. So this is what we have to think as we move forward in transformation. It's really meeting each other halfway, conciliation and agreement. But I'm a little bit sad, that's why I'm late today. I'm a little bit sad, my blood pressure is up. Last night we stayed till 11:30 at the negotiations room, and we didn't reach any agreement. I see you shaking your head. We didn't see any agreement at the negotiation process. We try to say for agriculture, the only area within the convention for agriculture is the Sharm el-Sheikh Joint Work on Climate Action for Agriculture and Food Security. And we ended in a deadlock and there's no conclusion. So this is beyond also the power of the presidency. This is party-driven. And it's gonna take a long time for us, I think. There are processes that are slow and there are processes that are quick if there's really high-level signal behind it. So I think these are all my messages. For the disappointment in the result in the negotiation for agriculture, we're still going to continue. With myself and a lot of friends who are all working with us in this space, we are providing a support called the Sharm el-Sheikh Support for Agriculture Negotiations, because we need to bridge the gap between climate policy engagement negotiations at this level, because your polls show that policy is very important. We need to bridge this gap between existing climate solutions for transformation in the food system and the policy process. So the presidency also came forward to offer a little bit of support in this area that's beyond us. But lastly, thank you so much. There are so many beyond the scene, behind the scene, within the success of the Emirati Declaration, with 134 heads of state level endorsement behind it, and more coming on December 10.
Thank you so much, Dada. And one word I'm missing in that was leadership.
I don't know if people know, but the food systems part of the UAE presidency is a very small team, and it's remarkable what you've achieved. We were very honored to have Dada join our annual meeting in Singapore a few months ago. And when I saw the scale of the mountain they still had to climb, I'm so grateful to you, and congratulations. You deserved every piece of that announcement, so thank you. So how can I sum up this remarkable panel? I've scribbled so many notes, and I'm not going to be able to do justice to these experts. But let me just share a few reflections and thoughts. So we're here at a very, very significant COP. Many of us have been waiting for the food systems agenda to collide with the climate agenda. And not just to collide, but to yield some real cohesion and commitments across the public and private. I couldn't be happier in this room today. On show here, we have not just multi-stakeholder action on display, we see South-South collaboration on display. We have an event here that's hosted by the Southern African Confederation and Vietnam, and the Ministry of Agriculture of Rural Development, I can bear witness to, has been a leader and a champion of colliding these two agendas for many, many years. So it's great to have Councillor Hui here representing that joining of agendas. But we also have governments like Brazil here, so we have a real South-South conversation right here with our public and our private representatives. I want to say special thanks to Danish and the team. I mean, the name of his organization sums up this important collision. Climb Eat is climate and food, and I know this moment is important for you as well, and congratulations to your team for being relentless in trying to put the right actors together. You have done what few have managed to achieve, and you've managed to get act as well as voices. You are from commitment into action, into results, fast enough to meet these twin challenges of climate and food insecurity than just commitments. It's going to take partnership. And we all know that partnership is difficult, as Dada so eloquently explained. We all come with our different agendas and priorities. We've heard the full spectrum on this panel. Move from commitment to action through partnership. Well, it's all about the conveners. We need to celebrate and make space for those organizations that are doing those difficult bringing together, finding the compromise, and occasionally standing firm and saying, no, we're not going to do 26 things, we're going to do 4 things well together. And that's vital, and that's what I'm hearing, the alignment on those 4 things are here in this room. All of these organizations are doing more than 26, but they can do 4 together, and that's the bit that will move the dial. So we're hearing that we need a food systems approach, and we've been talking about this for many years, but finally I think we've now got some evidence to show that systems solutions are working. Really enjoyed hearing Tuen's present organizations like SEAT and the Biodiversity Alliance, and they are showing that they now have evidence. There is results to speak for that food systems approach. We're hearing that it's going to drivers at the end, the pull of this is the consumer at the end. We know that if we don't tackle nutrition and consumer health, we're not going to fully realize a food systems and food secure future. But if we don't tackle the farmer and production challenges, we're also not going to deliver a future that is food secure. So who's in the middle? Well, it's governments, and I'm really glad actually that the audience voted that the number one actor in pulling us all together with the urgency that we need needs to be policy. And it starts this week with that head of state commitment, but that policy now needs to filter down through all of the ministries of agriculture, the ministries of health, the ministries of education, the ministries of finance that need to work together. And I'm delighted that we've got the multilateral organization to make sure that those technologies and innovations are getting into the hands of the people that are going to apply them to make this transformation. And that comes down to the farmers. The farmers at the moment lack the technologies and the innovations that they so badly need in order to transition their businesses to a more resilient and food secure future. And the only way that we can give farmers access to the technologies they need is through finance. Finance is critical. We're hearing it over and over again. We cannot just innovate the financial commitments. We've got to innovate the financial systems to get the finance into the hands of the farmers through small working capital loans. And we have not achieved that at scale in any way yet. Grow Asia as an organization was formed from a Davos moment. It's a joint venture between the World Economic Forum and the 10 ministers of agriculture in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN. And their vision was that we need pathways. We need global, regional, country, field pathways to put these solutions and finance into the hands of the hundreds of millions of small and medium-sized businesses that are going to be responsible for being more resilient. We can't make those businesses more resilient just by talking about being more resilient. We have to give them the tools and the finance so that they become more resilient. So I'm going to finish up by just going through the words that we heard. And I've put them in my own order because I think there's a little story along the words. So I heard insecure. I heard fragile. I heard vulnerable. And all of those things, some medium-sized enterprises at the moment at the heart of the food system. But then I heard opportunity. And I heard equity, because the system, as Ishmael quite rightly said, to be successful needs to yield the opportunities and the equity that will allow value chains to work effectively and pull through this transformation. And finally, because I have hope. I have hope standing here and listening to this conversation. I have hope hearing the results that we're already seeing. But my word weeks. I know there are many other problems, but for me, I've seen the evidence of investing in women's economic empowerment at every point of this agri-food system. And I believe if we invest in these systems and sectors, then there's real hope. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Beverly. And I don't have anything to add in terms of content, but just want to thank especially the audience. You know, it was a bit of a risk for us, you know, trying to leave it completely open and count on your contributions. We haven't done it before, but thanks for stepping up and providing those inputs. For the panel members, for, you know, your flexibility as well, being open to this idea and giving such rich inputs. To the speakers for bringing your and Sakal, who've been the ones hosting this together. And this is the food day, and there's 180 events.
182.
Yeah, 182 events on food systems. So do go to all of them, but there is one particularly I want to draw your attention where we heard the voices, but we do come here on these 3 topics together with the Bezos Earth Fund. So do come along if that's of interest to you. Thank you.
give you plenty blessings and okay. But you're not completely wrong because one of the functions of the agricultural commission is to bring money to agriculture. So if you are okay, we can talk a bit about this. Okay.
Okay. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this great event, great side event. You can be sure it's going to be the best of the whole COP. And I'm happy to moderate this session. Welcome to this event then organized by the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa and both ends. And we're going to discuss around key issues, talking about mechanisms that can help to advance agroecology across the world. And I would like to also to so I would like also to welcome our colleagues who are following online. So you are all welcome as well. And my name is Sena Luka. I come from Togo. I'm director of an NGO called Young Volunteer for the Environment. But I'm also very privileged to serve as the chair of the AFSA Climate Change Working Group. So we have a set of great speakers today and panelists ready to dive into the power of agroecology with a focus on three aspects. The first one is, of course, the role of agroecology in the negotiations. I hope some of you are following. We are in a very difficult situation in the negotiations with regard to the Sharm el-Sheikh work program on climate action in agriculture and food security. So they are going to dive into that. Also, we're going to discuss about the power of agroecology in practice. Agroecology is a movement, the practice is a science. So the practice part, we're going to discuss that. And now, how can we finance agroecology through very innovative financing mechanism? Which type of grant can we set up? We're going to discuss that as well in this very interesting event. So for the first session, I will be giving the chance to the coordinator, the general coordinator of AFSA, Mr. Million Belay, for his speaking remarks. Then I'll come back to tell you the rest of the program. Monsieur Million, please, let's put our hands together for Monsieur Million Belay.